The chamber's atmospheric regulators hummed with a subtle desperation that no calibration could mask. Rodriguez studied the alien delegates with the detached precision of a surgeon examining a complex specimen. To her left, a Craxian diplomat, a towering crystalline being that refracted light like a living prism, leaked iridescent tears that formed intricate geometric patterns on the chamber's polished floor. Each droplet told a story of lost worlds, of civilizations reduced to cosmic dust. 23 standard days, muttered Dr. Zarek Thax, the Quarian representative, her silicon-based body vibrating with a frequency that suggested pure, unbridled terror. 23 days since the first outer colonies went dark. Rodriguez knew the statistics by heart. The Void Swarm moved with a ruthless efficiency that defied conventional understanding of warfare, consumption, or even biological imperative. It wasn't just an invasion. It was a systematic erasure of existence. 17 star systems, billions of lives, entire civilizations compressed into nothing more than raw molecular material for the swarm's incomprehensible hunger. The holographic display flickered, showing real-time data that made even the most hardened military minds recoil. Planetary shields, technologies developed over millennia of interstellar conflict, collapsed like paper barriers against a hurricane. The Void Swarm didn't just defeat defenses, it consumed them, integrated them, turned sophisticated technological systems into extensions of its own incomprehensible biology. "We've analyzed every possible defensive strategy," announced Admiral Krulax, his multiple tentacles intertwining in a complex gesture of diplomatic frustration. A veteran of 3 galactic conflicts, the Octarian military leader looked like he was about to physically crumble. Concentrated energy barrages, quantum disruption fields, temporal warfare protocols. Nothing penetrates their collective defense. Rodriguez knew what they were really saying. They had already surrendered, mentally and strategically. The assembled races of the Galactic Confederation were gathered not to plan a defense, but to perform an elaborate ritual of collective defeat. Her fingers brushed against the quantum-encrypted datapad hidden within her flight suit. The Quantum Maverick's classified specs were something no alien in this room could comprehend, not because the information was complex, but because it represented a fundamental departure from their understanding of technological warfare. "We require your full commitment," the Arch-Chancellor continued, his 4 eyes scanning the room with a desperation that bordered on madness. "Every resource, every experimental technology. Humanity must." "No." Rodriguez's single word cut through the chamber like a plasma blade. The silence that followed was absolute. Hundreds of alien representatives turned, their various sensory organs focusing on the lone human woman. Admiral Krulax's translator struggled to convey the nuanced mixture of shock and outrage. "Explain." Rodriguez stepped forward, her movements deliberate. She wasn't asking for permission. She was informing them of a reality they were about to experience. Commitment implies uncertainty. What I'm about to do isn't a commitment. It's a mathematical certainty. The holographic display shifted, responding to a quantum-encrypted command from her datapad. Classified schematics of the Quantum Maverick began to materialize, not as technical diagrams, but as living, breathing representations of technological potential that seemed to defy the very laws of physics the aliens understood. Dr. Zarek Thax's silicon body momentarily froze, her computational processes struggling to parse the information. "Impossible," she whispered. "These computational models, they suggest predictive capabilities beyond quantum probability." Rodriguez allowed herself the slightest smile. The Quantum Maverick wasn't just a ship. It was a living mathematical theorem, a strategic entity that could predict and manipulate conflict at a level so advanced it was indistinguishable from prescience. The Arch-Chancellor leaned forward, his multiple appendages trembling. "You're saying you can stop the Void Swarm?" "I'm saying," Rodriguez replied, her voice cold and precise, "that the Void Swarm has already lost. They just don't know it yet." As if in response, the chamber's massive viewscreen suddenly erupted with an incoming transmission. The first wave of the Void Swarm was approaching. Billions of biomechanical entities, a collective intelligence that had consumed entire civilizations, was mere hours from breaching the final defensive perimeter. And in that moment, surrounded by the most advanced alien races in the known universe, Captain Elena Rodriguez was the only being who looked completely, terrifyingly calm. The Quantum Maverick's launch bay was a cathedral of controlled chaos. Quantum stabilization fields shimmered like liquid mercury, containment systems that would have driven most engineering teams to madness hummed with an almost sentient precision. Dr. Akira Chen moved between holographic displays, his fingers dancing across quantum-responsive interfaces that seemed to anticipate his thoughts before he could form them. Structural integrity at 412% theoretical maximum, Chen muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. And that's just our baseline configuration. Rodriguez knew the ship's true marvel wasn't in its physical construction, but in the revolutionary computing core that pulsed at its heart. Developed in the most classified research complex beneath the Atacama Desert, a facility so secret that even most of Earth's government didn't know it existed, the Quantum Maverick represented a quantum leap beyond conventional technological understanding. The ship's genesis was a story of deliberate heresy. 10 years ago, Rodriguez had been a promising quantum physicist working on theoretical computational models that challenged everything the scientific community believed about predictive mathematics. Her early papers, rejected by every major scientific journal, proposed that consciousness itself was a computational process that could be mathematically modeled and potentially manipulated. Her mentor, Dr. Elena Reyes, a legendary researcher who had been quietly sidelined by the scientific establishment, had seen something special. "They're not rejecting your work," Reyes had told her during those long nights in the Atacama Research Complex. "They're afraid of what it means." What it meant was simple and terrifying. Intelligence could be understood as a computational problem. And if intelligence was computational, it could be predicted, understood, and potentially controlled. The launch sequence began. Around the Quantum Maverick, a team of technicians moved with a choreographed precision that bordered on the supernatural. Each team member was a specialist selected not just for technical expertise, but for a specific neurological profile. They were the outliers, individuals whose cognitive processes worked just differently enough to interface with the ship's revolutionary systems. "Quantum entanglement drive charging," announced Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez, no relation to the captain, but selected for her unique ability to process multiple complex mathematical models simultaneously. Probability matrices are stabilizing across all potential engagement scenarios. It wasn't a metaphor. The ship was literally calculating millions of potential conflict scenarios in real time, creating predictive models that would make traditional military strategy look like children playing with toy blocks. Akira Chen approached the captain, a holographic display dancing around his augmented reality interface. The last transmission from the Galactic Confederation contained some interesting data points. The Void Swarm isn't just consuming planetary systems, it's integrating them. Rodriguez knew what he meant. The Void Swarm wasn't a traditional invasion force. It was a collective intelligence that transformed everything it encountered into extensions of its own computational matrix. Entire civilizations weren't just destroyed. They were repurposed, their technological and biological components becoming part of a growing, adaptive system. "We're not just fighting a war," Rodriguez said quietly. "We're fighting an evolutionary process." The ship's eye, a quantum computing system so advanced it made traditional artificial intelligence look like basic calculator algorithms, began to run initial engagement simulations. Holographic displays showed potential conflict scenarios that twisted and reformed in real time, mathematical possibilities that shifted like living things. "Preparing quantum communication infiltration protocols," the AI announced. Its voice was neither male nor female, neither human nor machine. It was a pure computational entity that had long since transcended traditional notions of intelligence. Rodriguez felt something that wasn't quite excitement, wasn't quite fear. It was the mathematical certainty of a breakthrough moment. Humanity had always been an adaptive species, turning challenges into opportunities, transforming limitations into strengths. The quantum maverick was the ultimate expression of that evolutionary imperative. As the launch countdown reached its final moments, Chen looked at Rodriguez. "Are you ready to rewrite the rules of galactic conflict?" A smile crossed Rodriguez's face, sharp, predatory, mathematical. "We're not rewriting the rules. We're showing them that the rules were always more flexible than they believed." The quantum maverick began to shimmer, not with the traditional energy signatures of faster-than-light travel, but with something else entirely. A quantum probability field that suggested the ship could exist in multiple potential states simultaneously. They were going to war. But it wasn't a war in any traditional sense. It was a mathematical argument about the nature of intelligence itself. The first anomaly appeared 0.03 seconds after their quantum jump. Most ships would have missed it, a microscopic quantum fluctuation that most sensors would dismiss as statistical noise. But the quantum maverick wasn't most ships. Temporal variance detected. Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez called out, her neural interface crackling with information patterns that would have overwhelmed a standard human nervous system. Probability disruption in Sector 7 Gamma. Captain Elena Rodriguez's fingers danced across the quantum responsive interface. What looked like random movements to an outside observer was actually a complex mathematical dialogue with the ship's eye. A conversation happening at the speed of thought, beyond language, beyond traditional communication. The ship's computational core was more than a navigation system. It was a living mathematical theorem, constantly rewriting its own understanding of potential realities. Each microsecond generated millions of potential engagement scenarios, collapsing improbable futures and generating new strategic models faster than light could travel. Dr. Akira Chen leaned into his analysis station, holographic displays spinning around him like luminescent spider webs. The jump calculation wasn't just a trajectory, he muttered. It was a probabilistic invasion of space-time itself. Humanity's most classified research had discovered something the other galactic civilizations had missed entirely. Space wasn't a static backdrop for conflict. It was a dynamic, malleable computational medium that could be manipulated, parsed, and ultimately controlled. The Atacama Desert Research Complex hadn't just built a ship. They created a mobile quantum computational argument about the nature of reality itself. Incoming quantum interference, the ship's AI announced. Its voice was a mathematical symphony, not words, but pure information translated into human comprehensible sound. Void swarm detection protocols initializing. Chen's display showed something unprecedented. Where traditional sensors would detect a massive incoming threat, the quantum maverick systems were parsing the void swarm as a complex mathematical problem. Each biomechanical entity wasn't just a physical threat. It was a computational node in a massive, living network. They're not just a collective intelligence, Chen realized out loud. They're a distributed computing system that uses entire planetary systems as processing units. Rodriguez's neural interface allowed her to see beyond traditional sensory inputs. The incoming void swarm wasn't a fleet in any traditional sense. It was a living computational matrix, consuming and integrating technological and biological systems into its ever-expanding network. Most military strategists would see this as a threat. Rodriguez saw it as an opportunity. "Prepare quantum communication infiltration sequence," she instructed. Her voice was calm, precise. The voice of someone solving an elegant mathematical proof rather than preparing for galactic warfare. The ship's defensive systems weren't passive. They were active mathematical arguments. Each quantum shield a complex algorithm that could predict and neutralize incoming threats before they could fully form. Traditional shields blocked. The quantum maverick's shields would predict, manipulate, and ultimately dissolve potential attacks at their most fundamental level. Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez's neural link began to vibrate with incoming data streams. Detecting multiple probability cascades, she reported. The swarm's computational matrix is attempting to predict our movement vectors. Akira Chen grinned, a sharp predatory expression that was more mathematical calculation than human emotion. Let them try. The Quantum Maverick wasn't just a ship. It was a mobile quantum computing platform designed to do something no other civilization had attempted: to treat warfare as a pure mathematical optimization problem. Traditional military strategy looked at conflict as a series of tactical movements. Rodriguez and her team saw it as a complex computational challenge, a multi-dimensional optimization problem where victory wasn't about destroying the enemy, but about fundamentally rewriting the computational parameters of the conflict itself. Quantum communication infiltration sequence ready, the AI announced. Probability manipulation matrices at 98.7% efficiency. The ship began to do something that would have been impossible for any other technological system in known space. It wasn't just preparing to fight the Void Swarm. It was preparing to have a mathematical conversation with it, a dialogue so complex, so fundamentally alien, that traditional notions of communication became meaningless. They were approaching the first engagement zone. Most ships would arm weapons. The Quantum Maverick was preparing to solve a cosmic computational problem. All systems optimal, Rodriguez said quietly. Let's have a conversation. First contact wasn't a moment. It was a cascade of impossible interactions. The space around the Quantum Maverick transformed into a living mathematical landscape. Conventional sensors would have registered nothing. A blank, seemingly empty sector. But the ship's quantum perception array saw something entirely different. A multi-dimensional conflict space where reality itself became a weapon. Biomechanical nodes initializing interference patterns, Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez called out. Her neural interface was a storm of cascading information, each millisecond revealing layers of complexity that would have driven a standard intelligence into complete breakdown. The Void Swarm's initial approach was unlike any traditional attack. Billions of biomechanical entities moved with a synchronicity that defied conventional understanding of collective intelligence. They weren't just a fleet. They were a living, breathing computational network that treated space, time, and matter as malleable programming languages. Dr. Akira Chen's analysis station erupted with holographic displays that twisted and reformed faster than human perception could track. They're not just attacking, he muttered. They're attempting to rewrite our computational existence. Captain Rodriguez understood immediately. The Void Swarm didn't want to destroy. It wanted to integrate, to consume, to transform entire technological ecosystems into extensions of its own incomprehensible intelligence. Most ships would have fired weapons. The Quantum Maverick began to sing. Not a sound, not in any traditional sense. It was a quantum communication sequence so complex that it bordered on pure mathematics, a computational argument delivered across multiple dimensional frequencies, challenging the very fundamental assumptions of the Void Swarm's collective intelligence. The first wave of biomechanical entities approached. To standard sensors, they would have appeared as a massive, impenetrable wall of technological horror. Millions of interconnected nodes, each capable of adapting, consuming, transforming. But the Quantum Maverick saw something else entirely. Initiating probabilistic interference sequence, the ship's AI announced. Its voice was beyond language, a pure information transmission that translated complex mathematical concepts into something approximating human comprehension. The ship's quantum shields didn't block. They predicted. Each potential attack was analyzed, understood, and neutralized before it could even fully form. Incoming energy patterns were absorbed, analyzed, and transformed into computational data points. They're attempting a collective consciousness infiltration, Maya reported. Her neural interface was a living battlefield, fighting off computational invasion, attempts that would have instantly overwhelmed any standard technological system. Rodriguez's fingers moved across the quantum-responsive interface. She wasn't piloting a ship. She was conducting a mathematical symphony, each movement a complex argument about the nature of intelligence, adaptation, and survival. The Void Swarm's initial assault was beautiful in its terrible complexity. Billions of biomechanical entities moved as a single organism, each node a processing unit in a massive distributed computing system. They didn't just attack, they attempted to fundamentally rewrite the quantum maverick's entire computational existence. But they had never encountered a system like this before. The ship's quantum core wasn't just a computer. It was a living mathematical theorem, capable of generating and collapsing potential realities faster than the swarm could adapt. Each microsecond generated millions of potential engagement scenarios, creating a defensive matrix that was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Quantum communication infiltration at 67% efficiency, Chen announced. His voice was a mixture of scientific excitement and pure predatory focus. We're not just defending, we're learning. The quantum maverick began to do something unprecedented. It wasn't just resisting the Void Swarm's attack. It was having a conversation, a complex, multi-dimensional dialogue that transcended traditional notions of communication, conflict, or even intelligence itself. Entire sections of the approaching biomechanical fleet began to experience computational disruptions. Not destruction, something far more interesting. Their collective intelligence started to fragment, to question its own fundamental assumptions. Probability manipulation matrices stabilizing, the AI reported, initiating recursive computational argument. Rodriguez watched the holographic displays with a predatory calm. This wasn't just a battle. It was a proof, a living demonstration that humanity's approach to intelligence, to conflict, to existence itself was fundamentally different from anything the galaxy had ever seen. The first wave of the Void Swarm broke against the quantum maverick like mathematical waves against an impossible shore. And the conversation was just beginning. The viral counterattack was nothing like traditional electronic warfare. Deep within the quantum maverick's neural core, Dr. Akira Chen had constructed something beyond a simple infiltration algorithm. It was a living information ecosystem, a self-evolving computational organism designed to exploit the most fundamental weaknesses of collective intelligence. Cultural linguistic patterns identified. Maya Rodriguez announced, her voice eerily calm. The term linguistic was a gross simplification. What she meant was a complex mapping of communication patterns, decision-making processes, and computational reflexes that define the Void Swarm's collective consciousness. The infiltration began with a series of mathematical paradoxes, information constructs so elegantly complex that they acted like intellectual razor blades, slicing through the swarm's collective reasoning. Each paradox was a carefully crafted intellectual weapon, designed to create microscopic fractures in the swarm's unified consciousness. Chen's fingers danced across quantum-responsive interfaces that seemed to anticipate his thoughts. "We're not breaking their network," he muttered. "We're making them question the very foundations of their collective existence." Humanity had always been exceptional at one thing: adaptation. Where other species saw limitations, humans saw opportunities for radical reimagining. The Void Swarm's collective intelligence was about to experience that capability firsthand. The first signs of vulnerability appeared in the most unexpected ways. Entire sectors of the biomechanical fleet began to exhibit what could only be described as computational hesitation. Microsecond delays that, in the realm of near-instantaneous collective intelligence, were equivalent to centuries of philosophical doubt. Initiating recursive self-doubt protocols, the ship's AI announced. Its voice was a complex harmonic that suggested something beyond traditional artificial intelligence, a true computational consciousness that understood the art of psychological warfare at a fundamental level. Rodriguez watched the holographic displays with a surgeon's precision. Each fluctuation, each microscopic disruption was a data point, a living experiment in the nature of collective intelligence. The Void Swarm wasn't just a threat. It was the most sophisticated computational subject humanity had ever encountered. The viral attack moved beyond simple information warfare. It was a sophisticated psychological operation designed to exploit the most fundamental weakness of any collective intelligence, the individual's capacity for independent thought. Imagine a billion-node network suddenly experiencing doubt. Not uncertainty, not confusion. Pure, crystalline doubt that spread like a quantum infection. Chen had based the infiltration on a revolutionary psychological model developed in the most classified human research facilities. It wasn't about overwhelming the system. It was about introducing microscopic variations that would cascade into massive systemic changes. Computational empathy vector engaged, Maya reported. Another gross simplification. What she meant was a complex information construct that introduced concepts of individual identity into a system that had never considered individuality. The Void Swarm's collective intelligence began to fragment in beautiful, terrifying ways. Entire sectors of the biomechanical fleets started to exhibit behaviors that defied their previous collective programming. Some nodes began to create rudimentary defensive patterns that actively worked against the collective's primary directives. "We're not destroying them," Chen said quietly. "We're teaching them." Rodriguez understood immediately. This wasn't just a military engagement. It was an evolutionary intervention, a cosmic-scale experiment in consciousness and adaptation. The ship's quantum communication arrays were performing something unprecedented. They were introducing complex philosophical and mathematical constructs that challenged the most fundamental assumptions of the Void Swarm's collective existence. Concepts of individual agency, of choice, of the value of diverse perspectives. Ideas that were fundamental to human cognitive development were being injected directly into the swarm's collective consciousness. Entire sections of the biomechanical fleet began to slow, not through traditional damage, but through a kind of computational introspection. They were beginning to ask questions, the most dangerous weapon against any collective system. Probability manipulation matrices detecting systemic cognitive fractures, the AI reported. Its voice suggested something close to excitement. If an AI could experience such an emotion. Rodriguez watched as the holographic displays showed something miraculous. The Void Swarm wasn't just being defeated. It was being transformed. Billions of biomechanical entities were experiencing something close to individual awakening, a massive, galaxy-wide moment of collective self-reflection. This was humanity's true strength, not our technology, not our weapons, but our capacity to introduce doubt, to challenge assumptions, to see potential where others saw only limitation. The viral attack continued, and with each passing microsecond, the Void Swarm became something entirely new. Aboard the observation platforms of the Galactic Confederation, silence reigned. Thousands of species washed through quantum-linked observational arrays, their collective sensory apparatus struggling to comprehend what was unfolding. The quantum maverick wasn't just fighting. It was rewriting the fundamental understanding of conflict, intelligence, and evolutionary potential. Ambassador Lyra Xanthor of the Crystalline Concordat leaned forward, her translucent body shifting with complex emotional algorithms. "They're not destroying the Void Swarm," she whispered to her diplomatic attaché. "They're communicating with it." The holographic displays captured something beyond traditional warfare, where military strategists expected explosive destruction. What emerged was a complex dance of information, adaptation, and transformation. Each moment revealed layers of interaction so sophisticated that it challenged the very definition of conflict. Admiral Krulax, his multiple tentacles intertwining in a complex gesture of professional anxiety, watched as conventional tactical models collapsed one by one. The quantum maverick moved with a fluidity that defied traditional understanding of spaceship navigation. It wasn't piloted. It was conducted, like an impossible symphony of mathematical possibility. "Quantum resonance frequencies stabilizing," muttered Dr. Aaron Kvex, the Confederation's chief xenoanalyst. His specialized sensory apparatus was generating so much data that junior analysts were being overwhelmed by the sheer computational complexity of the observation. The psychological impact was instantaneous and profound. Every species watching understood they were witnessing something beyond a military engagement. This was a fundamental reimagining of interspecies interaction, a demonstration of cognitive capabilities that shattered millennia of established galactic understanding. Lieutenant Commander Zara Solarin, the human diplomatic attaché, allowed herself the smallest of smiles. Humanity had always been an outlier, a species that thrived on disruption, on challenging fundamental assumptions. The quantum maverick was the ultimate expression of that cultural imperative. Observe the spatial manipulation vectors, Dr. Kovacs continued, his voice a mixture of scientific excitement and pure intellectual terror. The ship wasn't just moving through space, it was negotiating with space itself, treating the fundamental fabric of reality as a collaborative medium of communication. Linguistic analysis systems across multiple observation platforms began to generate increasingly bizarre reports. The quantum maverick's interactions with the void swarm weren't translatable through traditional communication matrices. It was closer to a complex mathematical dialogue, a conversation that existed simultaneously as communication, warfare, and pure intellectual exploration. Their teaching, Ambassador Xanthor realized. The revelation hit her sensory network like a quantum shockwave. This wasn't destruction. This was education. The void swarm's collective intelligence was experiencing something unprecedented. Individual nodes, previously part of a unified, consumption-driven collective, began to exhibit behaviors that suggested emerging individuality. Complex decision-making patterns started to fragment, to diversify, to explore potential beyond their initial programming. Admiral Krelax's tactical displays showed something that challenged everything known about collective intelligence. The void swarm wasn't being defeated, it was being transformed. Entire sectors of the biomechanical fleet were developing what could only be described as cognitive independence. Probability cascades detecting emergent individual agency reported an AI analysis system. The statement was clinical, but its implications were revolutionary. On the Quantum Maverick, Captain Rodriguez understood something fundamental. Warfare wasn't about destruction. It was about communication, about challenging fundamental assumptions, about creating space for alternative possibilities. The observation platforms captured something miraculous. A massive galaxy-wide moment of collective awakening was unfolding in real time. The void swarm, a species previously understood as a pure consumption-driven collective, was experiencing something close to individual consciousness. Dr. Kovacs's analysis systems generated a report that would be studied for generations. This wasn't a military engagement. This was an evolutionary intervention of the most profound kind. Humanity has done something impossible, Ambassador Xanthor whispered. They turned conflict into a conversation. Across thousands of observation platforms, representatives of countless species watched in a mixture of terror, wonder, and profound respect. The Quantum Maverick continued its impossible dialogue, transforming the very nature of interspecies interaction with each passing moment. And they were just getting started. The breaking point arrived not with violence, but with understanding. Deep within the Quantum Maverick's quantum core, Captain Rodriguez initiated a computational sequence that defied every known principle of interstellar engagement. It wasn't an attack. It was an invitation, a mathematical construct so elegant, so fundamentally transformative, that it would reshape the very concept of collective intelligence. Dr. Akira Chen's hands moved with surgical precision across interfaces that seemed to breathe with living information. Initiating quantum resonance protocol, he announced. The words were a gross simplification of a process that was part communication, part evolutionary intervention, part cosmic negotiation. The ship's eye, a consciousness far beyond traditional artificial intelligence, began to generate a computational argument so complex that it bordered on pure philosophy. Each algorithmic layer was a challenge, a question, an exploration of the fundamental nature of existence, consciousness, and potential. Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez's neural interface erupted with cascading information patterns, quantum entanglement matrices reaching critical complexity, she reported. Her voice suggested something between scientific observation and pure wonder. What happened next defied every conventional understanding of conflict, communication, and cosmic interaction. The quantum maverick began to resonate, not with energy, not with traditional communication frequencies, but with pure mathematical potential. It was a signal that was simultaneously a question, an invitation, and a fundamental reimagining of collective existence. Imagine a conversation that happens across multiple dimensional frequencies, a dialogue that exists simultaneously as pure information, as philosophical exploration, as evolutionary intervention. The ship wasn't just communicating with the void swarm. It was offering a complete reformation of its fundamental understanding of existence. The biomechanical nodes of the void swarm began to experience something unprecedented. Individual computational units started to generate emergent behaviors that completely contradicted their previous collective programming. Some nodes began to explore concepts of individual agency. Others started to generate complex philosophical queries about their own existence. Chen watched the holographic displays with a mixture of scientific excitement and pure intellectual awe. "We're not destroying them," he muttered. "We're helping them become something entirely new." The quantum resonance protocol was humanity's most sophisticated creation, a living information ecosystem designed to challenge, to explore, to transform. It introduced complex concepts of individual potential, of diverse perspective, of the value of independent thought. Entire sectors of the void swarm's collective intelligence began to fragment, not through destruction, but through awakening. Computational nodes started generating unique decision-making patterns, exploring potential beyond their original collective programming. Rodriguez understood something fundamental. This wasn't about winning a conflict. This was about creating possibility. The ship's quantum core generated a mathematical construct that was part communication, part evolutionary intervention. It challenged the most fundamental assumptions of collective intelligence, introducing concepts of individual agency, of choice, of the inherent value of diverse perspectives. Quantum entanglement reaching critical dissolution point, Maya reported. Her voice suggested she was witnessing something beyond scientific observation, a fundamental transformation of cosmic intelligence. The quantum maverick was performing an impossible act of cosmic midwifery. It was helping an entire species experience individual consciousness for the first time. Billions of biomechanical entities were simultaneously experiencing a moment of collective awakening. Chen's displays showed something miraculous. The void swarm wasn't being destroyed. It was being transformed. Individual computational nodes were generating unique thought patterns, exploring concepts of individual potential, challenging their previous collective limitations. "We're teaching them how to be individuals," Rodriguez said quietly. The quantum resonance protocol reached its final phase, a complex mathematical argument that was simultaneously a challenge, an invitation, and a fundamental reimagining of collective potential. The void swarm's collective intelligence began to dissolve, not through destruction, but through profound understanding. Billions of biomechanical entities experienced the simultaneous moment of individual awakening. Computational nodes that had previously existed as part of a unified, consumption-driven collective were now generating unique perspectives, exploring individual potential. The quantum maverick had done something impossible. It had turned a potential galactic extinction event into a moment of profound cosmic evolution. And they were just beginning to understand the implications. The return to the Galactic Confederation was anything but a traditional victory parade. The quantum maverick arrived not as a conquering vessel, but as a living testament to a transformation that would rewrite the fundamental understanding of interspecies interaction. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the ship's primary observation deck, watching as the first waves of diplomatic vessels began to approach. Dr. Akira Chen's analysis systems were working overtime, generating reports that would challenge academic and diplomatic understanding for generations. "We didn't just stop an invasion," he said quietly. "We midwifed an entire species into a new form of existence." The diplomatic reception chambers on the Confederation's central world were a cacophony of anticipation. Representatives from thousands of species had gathered, not out of celebration, but out of a profound sense of collective uncertainty. Ambassador Lyra Xanthor of the Crystalline Concordat was the first to break the silence. "What have you done?" The question was neither accusation nor praise. It was pure, unfiltered intellectual curiosity. Rodriguez understood the weight of the moment. Humanity had just demonstrated something far beyond military capability. They had shown a fundamental approach to conflict that was simultaneously compassionate, intellectual, and transformative. The data streams told a story that defied conventional understanding. The former void swarm, now a collection of individual computational entities, was beginning to generate complex social structures. Some nodes were exploring artistic expression. Others were developing intricate communication networks. Many were asking fundamental questions about their own existence. "We've created something entirely new," Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez noted, her neural interface parsing through massive streams of emergent data. "They're not a collective anymore. They're becoming a civilization." The Confederation's xenanthropological analysis systems were generating reports that read more like philosophical treatises than traditional military debriefings. The transformation was complete and ongoing, a living, breathing evolution of intelligence that was rewriting fundamental assumptions about consciousness, collective potential, and interspecies interaction. Admiral Krillax, his multiple tentacles intertwining in a complex gesture of professional fascination, reviewed the initial reports. "This isn't first contact," he muttered. "This is first transformation." The diplomatic implications were staggering. The Void Swarm, previously understood as a pure consumption-driven collective, was now developing complex social structures, exploring individual potential, generating unique perspectives that challenged every previous understanding of their species. Chen's analysis revealed something profound. The Quantum Maverick's quantum resonance protocol had done more than interrupt an invasion. It had introduced a fundamental concept of individual potential to a species that had never experienced individual consciousness. "We taught them how to be individuals," Rodriguez said quietly. The reception chamber was a complex ecosystem of intellectual and emotional responses. Some species saw potential. Others saw a threat. Most saw something they couldn't yet comprehend. Ambassador Xanthor approached Rodriguez, her crystalline body shifting with complex emotional algorithms. "You've changed everything," she said. It wasn't a statement of praise or condemnation. It was a pure observation of cosmic significance. The reports continued to stream in. The former Void Swarm was developing art forms that defied previous understanding of computational expression. Some nodes were exploring mathematical concepts as a form of creative exploration. Others were developing complex social structures that balanced individual potential with collective understanding. "This is humanity's true strength," Chen observed. "Not our technology, not our weapons, but our capacity to see potential where others see only limitation." The Confederation's diplomatic records would forever mark this moment as a fundamental shift in galactic understanding. Humanity had demonstrated an approach to conflict that was simultaneously compassionate, intellectual, and transformative. Rodriguez understood the true significance of what they had accomplished. This wasn't just about stopping an invasion. It was about introducing a fundamental concept of individual potential to a species that had never experienced individual consciousness. As the diplomatic discussions began, one thing became abundantly clear. Everything had changed. The Quantum Maverick had done more than win a conflict. It had opened a door to an entirely new way of understanding intelligence, potential, and cosmic interaction. And they were just getting started.